Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I'm Kristin Harmel.
And I'm Patti Callahan Henry.
And this is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support independent bookstores, authors, and librarians.
So, if you're not with us already, can't imagine why you wouldn't be. We hope you'll join our Facebook group, which is more than 250,000 members strong. We'd also like you to join us on Instagram and YouTube, and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which is full of incredible content. You can find out more about our community and all of us and everything we have to offer at friendsandfiction.com.
And with so many exciting things going on in our community, I wanted to remind you about our live and in-person events. We had so much fun at the Friends and Fiction live event in Atlanta, celebrating the launch of Miss Patti's new book, The Story She Left Behind, which we did in March. It was such a blast. It was actually on St. Patrick's Day, so we showed up in our green, and it was so great to get the community together. So be sure to mark your calendars, because we have 2 more of these live Friends and Fiction events coming up this summer.
In just 2 days, which is this Friday, May 30th, we will all be together again. The band is back together in Myrtle Beach to celebrate Kristy's launch of that book, Beach House Rules, with Litchfield Books. Then just a few weeks later, on Tuesday, June 17th, we'll all be together again at the Jersey Shore to celebrate Kristin's new one, The Stolen Life of Colette Marceau. This is an event hosted by Booktown, and it's at the gorgeous Algonquin Theater in Manasquan, New Jersey. Tickets for both events are already on sale, and honestly, they're going really fast. Snip, snip, snip. So get yours before they sell out.
Absolutely. All right. So tonight, we are so excited to welcome our dear, dear friend, Kristina McMorris, to discuss her new novel, The Girls of Good Fortune, which was just released on May 20th.
So I want to give you a bit of background on Kristina. You know her, you love her, but we're going to talk about her anyway. So Kristina is a New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today bestselling author of 2 novellas and 8 historical novels, including the 1 million copy bestseller Sold on a Monday.
Yeah, that is pretty impressive. So she's the recipient of more than 20 national literary awards, and she previously hosted weekly TV shows for Warner Brothers and an ABC affiliate, beginning at the age of 9 with an Emmy award-winning program. She also owned a wedding and event planning company, which was a career she worked in until she had far surpassed her limit of YMCA and chicken dances.
That's hilarious. Every wedding, just every wedding. Every wedding. So that's a good book title, Every Wedding. So Kristina lives near Portland, Oregon, where she's the proud mom of 2 college boys who keep her on the run and keep her laughing. Her new novel, The Girls of Good Fortune, was just released on May 20th, and it shines a light on shocking. I read the novel months ago, and I still think about it. The shocking events surrounding Portland's dark history. It is a gripping novel of love and lore and betrayal.
Sean, can you bring Kristina on?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, friends.
Hi, too.
It is so good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for the wonderful intro. And yes, it is awesome to see you guys. It's summertime. We're on the verge, right? We're on the verge of summertime. So
We're about to tip over.
You guys speak for yourselves. I'm in Florida, where it's been summertime since like February. I feel like it's already 11 billion degrees here.
And like spring is my favorite season. I love spring. Everything is so green, and the hydrangeas and the all of my hometown is bursting with spring and magnolias. And I
Ah,
kind of dread the heat of summer, but it's
yeah.
coming.
Yeah.
It is coming. It's coming, baby. All right, Christina, welcome back to the Friends in Fiction show. We are so happy to have you. We are always so happy to have you. Now, The Girls of Good Fortune is the riveting historical story of a woman named Celia, who's half Chinese, but who is passing for white in 1888 Oregon, at a time when anti-Chinese sentiment was at a murderous height, particularly in the Western United States. From falling in love with someone forbidden to having to survive on her own when the bottom falls out of her life, to being abducted and taken away on a ship bound for somewhere across the Pacific. This story grabs us from the first page. I should also note that the Washington Post has named it as a must read. And you actually have a copy of the book you can show us, right? So we can see the beautiful, gorgeous edges of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm coming from like a little place of jealousy because like those are some beautiful sprayed edges.
Absolutely. So this is it. Oh my gosh, I've been like petting it. It's lovely. So it's got I don't know if you can tell, but it's got the gold embossed foil and the edges that are just so pretty. So that's a first
Gorgeous.
edition. So yeah, people that get the first edition will get this one. It's lovely. Yeah. I'm
It's
excited.
so pretty. Okay, so we know a little bit about what the book's about. We know that it is a beautiful book on the outside as well as in. Can you tell us a little bit more about The Girls of Good Fortune? And then our favorite question, what is the book really about?
Sure. Yeah. So as you said, we got the character Celia. So the book starts in 1888 Oregon when a woman awakens in an underground cell. She's drugged and disguised, as you both know. She has no idea why that is or how she got there. But as her memory starts floating back to her, she starts piecing together the path that led to her abduction. So she does know that she is in the so-called Shanghai tunnels in Portland, and she knows then that she has left behind a child in peril. So it is going to take all of her creative adaptive skills, especially as you said, because she is half Chinese passing as white. So she is used to adapting in order to not only survive, but hopefully make it back to those she loves in time. So that is the gist of the plot line. And as you mentioned, there are things in there that, as far as the things that I'm most excited about, and I should say more, probably less excited as much as eager, because it is some dark topics in there. It's a lot of hope and love and family all in the story. Lots of questions of identity, because as she struggles with who she is and where she belongs in this world, which is something, being half Asian, I could kind of relate to that on a very lesser scale and get to infuse into the story. But we do talk about the Shanghai tunnels, which is very fun, and also a couple atrocities that happened in history that I was shocked I'd never heard about before. Two of them being the Rock Springs Massacre, and in Oregon, which I'm from, the Hell's Canyon Massacre. And those were two things that I had never heard about before, and thought I was very eager to share that with readers.
Well, we're
Amazing.
excited to ask you about both of those things because we want to kind of delve more deeply into the Shanghai tunnels and into the history of those terrible massacres. But before we get to that, can you tell us what you think this book is really about at its core? I guess we talked a little bit about friendship and love and all of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, family is a big one in this, and also what you're willing to sacrifice for those that we
Yeah.
love. That's topics that we, all three of us, are very familiar with in our story.
Yep.
And finding, once again, I know the three of us have written World War II stories and other similar topics and timelines that really are, I think, ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And then, having hope at the end of the story, whether it is, not necessarily with a tidy bow at the end, but how we can get through hard times in order to get to a better life, we hope, and a stronger character by the end of the story, which is the hope. So there is really, with the story with the Girls of Good Fortune, which is why I'll show one more time, not because publicizing, but because the cover really, I think, encapsulated kind of the Chinese lore, which is where the kind of the clouds and all that come from, which the cover designer, Lucy Kim, who's Asian also, I thought she just nailed it. And that is because the story is a lot about the art of storytelling and the importance of identity and culture that we pass down through generations by telling our stories to the next generation. It's passed along. And sometimes it picks up, as my grandma would call it, a little bagash and bagali, just
I
like
love that.
her recipes. She's always like, I never measure. It's just a little bagash magali. And Of course, there's recipes in the back of the book because how could I not include those? But I think, our stories kind of pick those up as we pass them down. And yet there's truth at the core of all of it, and the strength. And like I said, the identity and the importance of family that gets passed down. So for me, that's what it's largely about.
I love that. So I was fascinated to learn about Portland's Shanghai tunnels. This is the world unto itself, a world of opium parlors and gambling and, yes, tunnels. I want to know, and I think we all ask each other this in the historical fiction world, but how did you learn about it and then bring it alive for the pages of this novel?
Sure. Well, what's so funny is, like I said, I'm essentially an Oregon native. We moved there when I was just a few weeks old. And yet I did not hear about them until about a dozen years ago because of a ghost hunting show where I say, naturally, that's where we get all our best ideas.
I better start watching ghost hunting shows. Goodness. That's amazing.
Who would have known? So because of that, and a friend and I had chatted about the tunnels because of the show. And I thought, wow, this would make a great setting for a story. I just didn't know what the story was until recently. But the tunnels, for those who don't know about them, there are a lot of people in Oregon, like I said, who don't know about them still too, which is amazing. So I'm not alone. But they are a labyrinth of tunnels under downtown Portland that used to exist, largely concentrated under Chinatown. And what they were, there's a lot of legends and theories of why they were originally built. But what we do know is the tunnels were a gridded system that you could drop off goods from basement to basement. So a very efficient system, especially if you have ships that are below street level and go straight into the tunnels. But to your point about opium dens and gambling halls, there are nefarious purposes when you have underground tunnels in a seedy port town. So some of the things they were also used for was escaping raids from both of those things, since opium at one point was legal, but was smuggled very often because of high tax. So you could have raids from police or Chinese rival Tong members so people would escape through those to get to the basements and get to street level and escape. But there are also theories and a lot of stories of people being shanghaied, and in part using the tunnels for that purpose. So Portland was known as the Shanghai capital of the world. And for those who don't know what being shanghaied is, we probably all have heard of being shanghaied as in being kidnapped, right? A colloquialism for that. I'm guessing you both have heard of it that way.
Oh,
before.
absolutely. Yeah.
So being shanghaied, in short, was an able-bodied man, a sailor who drinks a drugged ale in a saloon, and so wakes up either because, legend has it, some would be dropped through a trapdoor in the floor into a cart, be carted off, or you could wake up in a cell underground. The kind of worst case scenario is you wake up on a ship already at sea, and you are told then that you are sold to the captain for $50. Upwards of $50 a head, because they were shorthanded. And you have two options at this point. You can either work on board, forced labor all the way to a place as far away as Shanghai, they would say, and back, a 6-year round trip, or refuse and be tossed overboard. So those were the two options. And for those who are curious about the Shanghai tunnels, I have to say that I'm very excited what's coming up very soon. Anyone who purchases the book in any form can go to my website. I also have it pinned on social media. And there is a link then that you can explain, kind of where you bought it, et cetera. And you will register for an exclusive virtual, so from your couch, virtual highlights tour of the Shanghai tunnels. So a guide and I will be taking people virtually down there, which is a rarity. They never allow recordings down there. And so that is something I'm very excited about on June 10th.
Oh, that is so very cool. What a neat thing to be able to do. So you can really kind of bring the world of your novel alive to any reader who orders it by June 10th. That is fantastic.
Yeah. It was also fascinating to me to learn where the term Shanghai came from. I love being a word nerd and wondering the origin of words and never understanding what that meant. But to be taken, to be kidnapped, to be put into labor for something you didn't want to do, like now it makes sense at, reading the novel. So
for sure. Yeah. On tour.
Thank you for satisfying this word nerd. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. No, on tour, it's been so fun to explain that. And people go, oh, when they're getting books. I never thought about where that word comes from.
Yeah.
call it being shanghaied when you're kidnapped. They said it makes so much more sense. So I'm with you. I didn't know it either until I researched.
No, it's so neat. It's just one of those words you take for granted in slang, and it really has a very deep meaning behind it. So, another plot point in this novel revolves around, as you mentioned, the Hell's Canyon Massacre, which is a horrifying moment in our history, to say the least. Can you tell us a little bit about it and why it was such a natural fit for this novel?
Sure, absolutely. So as I was researching the tunnels in Oregon history, a friend of mine who is a history buff, Shelley McFarland, she had messaged me and said, you do know about the Hell's Canyon Massacre, don't you? And because she's an Oregonian. And I thought, the what? I'm sure if you both heard that too, you'd say the exact same thing. So the Hell's Canyon Massacre, obviously it's a longer story, but in short, it is what happened was there were 31 to 34 estimated gold dust miners that were all Chinese immigrants that were in northeastern Oregon on the border of Idaho. They were gold dust mining for about 9 months. So the presumption is that they hit some kind of jackpot there to stay that long. And it is an extremely remote area of Eastern Oregon, in that you're way down in the canyons, some places deeper than the Grand Canyon, which is why it was dubbed Hell's Canyon. Of course, it aptly fits for horrible reasons afterwards, after the late 1800s. And that is because there was a gang of 7 white horse thieves, one of them as young as 15, that surrounded the area and over a 2-day period slaughtered all of the gold dust miners, mutilated them, did horrible, horrible things to them. And what was crazy is the gold disappeared, of course, but months later, one of them confessed and came forward. All 6 were indicted, and then 3 of them took off, and the other 3 actually were put on trial. And yet it was really a sham of a trial over a 2-day period. So I don't think it gives away too much to say that there were court documents that were put in the county clerk's office in a safe separate from the archives, strangely enough, because there were a lot of prominent family members tied to those families and to the men who were on trial. And so that safe was tucked away for over 100 years. And not until 1995 did they donate the safe to a county museum. And that's when the county clerk exposed the documents. But of course, there's still so many of us that have never heard about it. So I thought that is absolutely something that needs to go in the story.
Wow. Well, it's really, I thought you used it in such an interesting way in the novel, because I feel like it's part of Celia's journey to like owning who she is. Like it's like she has to experience that horror from the outside looking in, I think, to more fully own her own identity. I just thought it was really beautiful the way you wove that story in. I was also curious, just from a decision of how you plotted this, what made you decide to include Frank Vaughn, who was a real life person who was actually part of that massacre and trial? I mean, you could have fictionalized the whole thing. You could have, you could have done this without including him as a real character, but you did. And I thought that really lent something special to this. I think it lent a little bit more authenticity to it.
Sure. Yeah. I'm always super wary of, as you both understand too, super wary of including real historical figures when we know exactly what they would have said. And that is, of course, where historical fiction comes in. We get to kind of use our imaginations based on the facts that we do know and the personality that we do know. And so in this case, I did have at least his deposition. And so knowing word for word things that he said in the trial allowed me to be able to use that for parts of the story. We also know, though, that he did come forward. He did confess. And I thought, so that for me, that was a driving question of what would push a person like that during that time period with so much to lose. Why would he come forward and confess that? And so I thought how interesting it would have been to have his life intertwined then in a very unexpected way with Celia. And maybe she would have just a little bit to do with that. So you like to think that he really did that for a very good reason. And that's kind of up to the reader to decide that too.
Yeah, that only one of them confessed that he carried that burden and then unloaded it. So you mentioned in your author's note that you, as the daughter of a Japanese immigrant whose inherent customs and culture haven't always blended with your parents' desire for the children to be proud Americans, you recall very early in life not knowing exactly where you fit in. So, how did your experience, very different from Celia's, but help shape Celia?
Yeah. So absolutely. As we all say, we like to put, there's always a piece of us in all of our characters. I want to say, are you asked that? Which character is most like you? And I think
Yeah.
the kind of a little bit of it, a little bit of us in each one of the characters, but largely it ends up being more toward one character. In this case, of course, her being half Asian, as you said, during the time, as Kristin said, during the time that was extremely anti-Chinese. So thankfully, I didn't grow up with sort of that extremely anti-Japanese sentiment that would have been prevalent in, say, World War II time period and just after. So you can imagine with my parents getting married when my late grandfather, had served in World War II against the Japanese, and in the Pacific at one point in the Navy. So there was tension in that way, and that helped melt away when you have grandchildren, and I think that when they have grandchildren that you can forget a lot of things that that you held on to. And I think in this story, the two cultures colliding and trying to figure out how they blend. For me, I remember not knowing, as you said, exactly where I fit in school. Very often I was, my pictures of kindergarten, it's kind of all blonde hair, blue eyes all the way across. I was so envious of you two. And
No blue eyes, but I have
So,
brown eyes hiding under these glasses.
okay, good. Yeah, right. So I do have the brown eye. Yeah.
Mine are blue. Sorry.
It's you. You just need to stop talking now. So, no, but I'm like kind of I laugh about being like the one Asian, girl that was in the crowd of the group. You could find me like, where's Waldo, very fast and easily. And so, but as you said, my dad, really wanting us to be proud Americans. And I think that is a struggle that I find so interesting and largely universal with immigrants, coming to a country that they want a better life for their families and for their children, and him not wanting us to have accents because he felt that was a negative thing that he was dealing with. And he still has it, as you guys know, even all these decades later. But later in life, also regretting that he didn't teach us the language right from the get-go, and that was something that me and one of my sisters learned a bit later, but it was something that I think that he regretted later in life, that culture and the history that is a bit lost when you don't pass those things along.
Yeah, that is so true. I was also thinking, reading the book, you have the Hell's Canyon massacre, and there's another massacre that happens in the book, and those are just such obvious forms of evil and cruelty. But then you have the Betancourt family, who also play an important role. And although they're not murderous, it's not like the Hell's Canyon massacre. They do a lot of damage as well, as did many people, I think, who may have felt like, well, I didn't get my hands dirty, but there are other ways to hurt people and other ways to exclude people. Can you talk a little bit about the Betancourt family and what inspired them?
Sure, absolutely. So interesting enough, so that is the mayor and his family. And because, Celia has a relationship then with their son, secretly at the beginning of the book. I'm not giving anything away. You get it right from the get-go. And so for me, again, it's kind of pulling from family memories and stories that I've been told of even, uncles that served in World War II on my mom's side and, out in the Midwest and refusing to come to the wedding. But
oh, wow.
For and understandable reasons, they did serve over in World War II, but also in the Pacific. So later in life, also, us coming together and going to family reunions and it being much warmer then. But I did kind of end up pulling from that firsthand, and that you are going to have some resentment, especially in this story, during a time that with the anti-Chinese sentiment, even with a mayor who gets into it because he wants to do good. And then how politics and power and fear can really change people. And in this case, it's all of those things. So for the Betancourts, I thought it's amazing how much more it can hurt. We all know from, having harsh words, sometimes they're worse than actions, but having harsh words and attitudes from people that we admire and that we care about and we want their approval can hurt so much more than a million strangers. So I think that's kind of how that came about, and as far as the Betancourts go.
I also think just as a novelist, it's really powerful to explore characters like that who are neither all good nor all bad. I mean, because none of us are all good or all bad, right? But Celia really gets to experience, I think, the full range of good and bad with them. And I think that just deepens her journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And that's what we hope with our characters, right? I think we all, even in real life, it's, if you don't have some hardships, it's the best possibility of growth. And
Yep.
so through the characters, if she just had easy street, first of all, it wouldn't be a very exciting story.
That's true.
And we'd not like her very much. I think for life is too easy. But it's those hardships, I think we all try to communicate the three of us in our stories that, you go through those hardships, but there's something to gain through it. And so that's my hope with Celia.
Yep, awesome.
Well, speaking of the Betancourts and Celia and dragging them from history, I think when we write historical fiction, we aim, all three of us do it. And I think we write about it for loads of reasons. For me, a lot because it's just interesting, but we also, aim to illuminate the past. But I think historical fiction can illuminate the present by illuminating the past, because there are always echoes or parallels about things happening today. I know you don't write to teach a lesson and you don't write for people to reflect on their lives, but are there lessons or reflections that you would hope a reader in 2025 takes away from this story and this time that was set more than 130 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if we don't pass along these stories, I think that's definitely why we all write historical fiction. The number one reason we do is that we get to learn about history. We get to pass those stories along so that hopefully we can find the mistakes that they made in the past that we could do better. And I don't think there's any question about the fact that when you have, politicians in the story, in my story, which did run on slogans such as, get the Chinese out, and we're winning on those campaigns and kind of, making the focus about something negative or blaming a certain type of people. I think that that is something that's happened in America for sure, many times with the Japanese Americans during World War II and the internment, but also all over the world. It happens all the time. And the hope is that we reflect on that, and hopefully we read it in a story and we think, that we don't want to be that country, we don't want to be those people, and hopefully we can just keep getting better.
Yeah, that's the hope.
That's a great answer. Now, you mentioned in your author's note a marathon plotting session with your friend, author Therese Walsh. Can you talk a little bit about how you plot out a book like this and how this book in particular came together as you brainstormed it with Therese?
Sure, absolutely. So at first I called Therese and I think she is thankfully, oh my gosh, this, and we all need those author friends, right? That we call and say, what do you think about this story? And the ones that get really excited. So I joke with every book I've written for as long as I can remember, since maybe my third novel, I called Therese and said, what do you think of this? And I give her a 1-sentence pitch. She's my Spielberg in an elevator.
Oh, I love that.
And she will tell me if she gets chills. So we've dubbed it the Therese chillometer. And so, when she says, oh, I've got chills, I said, I do too, as I described it.
Okay.
So,
I love that. I want to call her.
Yeah. I know. And I said, that's the story then, because we all know, at least I do, that about a page 150, I know that I'm going to think whatever book I'm writing is the most boring book in the history of books.
Of course.
And you think, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? But I've got a deadline. I don't have time to come up with something new. And so thankfully, I always go back to the chillometer and think, okay, but that one sentence gave me chills. So I know that I'm onto something. I know that if I just keep going, I get through the fog, and that will be the thing that I hold on to. So that is what happened. And yes, hours. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that she helped me for hours at a time. One time, I think when we first plotted it, it was, I think, a 3.5-hour plotting session on the phone. And then a couple more times during the book when I said, I know what the ending is, but I don't know how we can get there. And we spent 4 hours on the phone figuring it out.
Oh my gosh. Do you do the same in return?
No. She hasn't asked me yet, but I would in a heartbeat. And so, goodness, she's probably watching this going, okay, I'm getting ready to call her. So that is the best friend ever, isn't it?
Oh my gosh. So just as important as having that friend is knowing which friends not to give a tender idea to.
That's a good point.
Right? Like you
Yeah.
say it and you have chills, but you haven't figured out how to say it right yet. And they go, huh?
Yeah.
And like the idea dies before it can even grow roots in the soil. So I think knowing that she has a chilometer and wouldn't, kill a little sapling by going, what? It's just as important as knowing who to bring an idea to.
Yeah.
So I love that relationship. That's really sweet.
Yeah. Thank you. And I hate to sound a little sexist here, but as I'm thinking it through, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, very often I think you are probably safer most of the time going to a female friend for the chilometer. We tend to get a little more excited, and outwardly excited, I should say. Sometimes the guys can keep it in and be like, that sounds good. Like, oh yeah, I think that could work.
I can tell my husband and sons my book ideas. Like, first of all, they bring half attention, not full attention. So forget it, right? Like, what's for dinner, Mom?
Oh my God.
Okay. What was it like for you researching and writing a book set in your own backyard, especially after your previous book, which was set between Michigan and Europe? So were there some ways that the research was easier, some ways that it was harder because you were in Oregon? You're not there right at this moment, but you were there when you were writing this, correct?
Yes, I was. And the nice thing about it, of course, is that, yes, my backyard, it's a city I'm familiar with, and it's something I have a lot of passion for. So for that, it's pretty easy in that I know the rivers, etc. What is different, which doesn't make a difference if I'm from there or not, as we all know, is that it's not the same as it was in 1888.
Yeah.
So those streets are different. Chinatown was in a different area. And then trying to find those maps and the streets and all of that, it does not matter if I'm from there, right? It's still the exact same research. The one nice thing is that you can then, drive 20 minutes and be in the same area. You don't have to take a flight over to Europe or something, even though that sounds lovely.
Yeah, right now it does. Yeah.
It's always a really nice business write-off, yes, when it's for our homes. So going to Portland and being able to talk to the downtown Chinatown Museum and go through their exhibits and talk to them, things like that are so convenient. But the most challenging thing I would say is that this was a different time period, definitely the oldest I've ever written. So going into the 1800s, where that is a big shift, 1880 to 1920, even though it's not that many years in time, especially in the history of the world, it's just a blink. And yet, of course, especially in the US, the American West, it was so different once we got to the Model A's and the Model T's and people could drive and you were outside of your little house on the prairie town. Yeah. And so that was a big difference, and trying to figure out the balance of that, because people are still people, but the slang being a little bit different, and yet not wanting them to sound like caricatures, of course.
Yep. Of what we imagine the 1800s to be. When I wrote Surviving Savannah, 1838 Savannah, what was kind of crazy is Savannah really isn't that different than it was in it looks different. People have cars and phones, but the streets were in the same grid. The buildings are still where they were. The river dock is still where it was. Like I could walk where they walked, but Portland has turned into such a monstrous, metropolitan city that everything has shifted. So for you to have to go back and find it all, I love that you had all of it right there at your fingertips, but still you couldn't just walk down the street where Chinatown was.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where the Oregon Historical Society and stuff comes in. And those historical societies in every city are just amazing. And the people that take care of the history for us, that pass along the archives, are so helpful. So being able to pull up photos from them, any request I had of anything obscure they could come up with in a day. And that was really nice and helpful.
Yep. Oh, that's awesome. And Patti, now I have an image of like Wet Willie's frozen drinks bar in Savannah, like in the 1800s. It really hasn't changed that much. You would just sidle up and ask.
The custom house was there. The church was there, but no, not Willie's Wet House or the T-shirt where you can get your name airbrushed. That was not there.
That's weird.
All right, Kristina, if you would stick around, we have more to talk to you about, and I won't say any more nonsense. But first, a few quick reminders for our listeners and our viewers out there.
So, hey, y'all, watching and listening. We want you right now to rush out and buy your copies of The Girls of Good Fortune. And the perfect place to do that is in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll not only be getting the book at a discount with its very pretty gold edges, but all your purchases there support our show, our guests, like Kristina, and indie bookstores nationwide, which is why we started this show in the first place.
Absolutely. And don't forget to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule, our upcoming in-person events, which we mentioned at the top of the show, and links to the award-winning Friends and Fiction official book club with Brenda and Lisa, as well as our merch store and our Substack newsletter sign-up.
So our Substack. I love talking about this. It's a very fancy word for a newsletter. So you can read all of our free weekly posts and newsletters on what is called the Substack website or app. You can get an app too. So you can subscribe for free and they will drop directly into your email, like your inbox, like any newsletter that you get. And if you upgrade to the paid Substack, which is just $5 a month, you'll have access to deeper dives with all of our weekly show guests like Kristina. She has an interview that only weekly paid members get. Plus, we do these incredible, sometimes bi-monthly, sometimes monthly roundtable discussions like the one we just did with Meg and Ron celebrating National Library Week. We do bonus Q&As. Meg just did an incredible one with called Totally True Tuesdays, that included some memoirists that were, I've read it twice. It is so interesting. We've had bonus Q&As with Sarah Penner, one of your favorites here at Friends and Fiction, Jill Santopolo, and Susan Mallory. So if you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a really big way that you can support us for about $1 a week. I mean, come on, that's like 1/3 of a star, like 1/5 of a Starbucks. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com. I'm done talking.
All right, Kristina, back to you. Can you give us any hint about what's coming up next for you?
Well, I'm finally circling back to an idea, historical idea from the West Coast again, which is so fun. Again, my backyard a bit. And I, lived a lot of my life in Oregon or California. And I'm in like sunny San Diego right now, which is lovely. And it makes me also want to write about California. So the new story will be set here. And I can just tell you that there's so much I want to tell you. I will tell you once we aren't filming anymore, once we're not like airing anymore. But yes, I just know that I've had the idea for many years. I want to say probably like 10 years, and I just didn't know what the story was yet. And I'm very excited to finally circle back to it. So that is next. And other than that, I am just still on the road, touring all over the place. So for the foreseeable future, in the next, June and July, I'll be hopping all over the East Coast. I'll be in Florida, South Carolina, I think North Carolina. I will be in Nevada, Maryland. That's not, and then I was going to say that's not like Southeast, but going, north, which will be very fun. I've never done Maryland for a stop before. A lot more cities, and also the Midwest. So I'll be in Minnesota, etc. Anyway, all of that on my website in case people want to try to catch me. It'd be very fun to see them in person, doing whole historical presentations, all the things I talked about with images and a lot more info.
Awesome. Cool. And then you and I get to meet up at the end of June for a joint event in San Diego. So lots of fun stuff to look forward to. Kristina, where can people find you online also if they wanted to look up your full tour schedule?
Sure. Yeah. So on my website is just my name, easy, KristinaMcMorris.com. And then also Instagram and Facebook. I'm on both of those. So I've got an author page and a personal and then Instagram. I'm over there too, and definitely be posting some of the events I'll be at.
Okay. Perfect. So for any of you listening and not watching, since this is airing as a podcast as well, that'll be Kristina McMorris, Kristina with a K, Kristina, McMorris.com. So Kristina, thank you so much for joining us. It was such a pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being with us on the Friends and Fiction Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. It was so good to see you too.
Oh, you're amazing. So everyone out there, be sure to tune in next week when Mary Kay and Meg will be joined by Annabelle Monahan, Meg Mitchell Moore, Martha Hall Kelly. I'm not done. Wendy Francis, Amy Mason-Doan, and Brooke Lee Foster for our summer kickoff beach party. Yes, you heard that right. It's a big party with a whole lot of authors, and you're invited. That show will air on the Friends in Fiction Facebook page and YouTube channel on Wednesday, June 4th at 7 p.m. And then, as usual, on Friday, it will be published to our podcast on June 6th.
All right. And stay tuned to Friends in Fiction socials because we're doing a big 8-book beach reads giveaway, including all of our guests' books from that beach party episode, as well as Mary Kay's and Kristy's newest beach reads also. So I cannot imagine a better way to stuff your beach bag for the summer. So thank you to all of you out there for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.